Color guard attention. Scout's attention. Scout salute. Color guard forward march. Color guard halt. Prepare to post colors. Post the colors. Would everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard halt face. Color guard forward march. Color guard halt. Return to ranks. You may be seated.
Roll call, please.
Bill?
Here.
Colosimo?
Present.
Scott?
Here.
Wojcicki? Here. Readers?
Here.
Hunkhauser?
Here.
Spears? Teeling?
Here.
Quorum is established.
Do we have any amendments to tonight's agenda? Okay, we'll go on to presentations. We do have one of my favorite presentations tonight, and that's to honor a new Eagle Scout here in Yorkville. But before we call Michael Krause up, I'd just like to talk about the significance of the Eagle Scout rank. I know a lot of people know about Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, but they don't really know the dedication and hard work that really takes to become an Eagle Scout. I'd just like to read something real quick about the significance of the Eagle Scout rank. Webster's dictionary describes an eagle as a large bird of prey with sharp vision and powerful wings, famous for their strength, size, grace, and keen vision. It is the national emblem for the United States. Though the eagle is found throughout the world, it is never found in abundance. It is always rare and it is always a superb specimen. In scouting, the eagle stands for strength of character and for knowledge of all phases of scouting. The eagle represents an understanding of community and nation and a deep respect for both. The eagle is a symbol of what a man has done as well as what a young man will do and will be when he grows to manhood. The eagle is a leader. The eagle is respected both by his peers and by his adult leaders. The Eagle Scout Award is the highest award available to youth members of the Boy Scouts of America. It represents many years of dedicated effort and the successful completion of a long process, which starts when a young man becomes a Boy Scout. It is a demonstration of how people working together can truly help mold a young man with a solid sense of leadership, citizenship, and responsibility. Not every Boy Scout, not every boy, nor every scout qualifies for a high-ranked Eagle. The physical requirements are strenuous, as set forth in the required merit badges. Mental requirements are unusual and require much more than average intelligence. Perhaps an even more difficult and more important requirement for the Eagle Scout rank is the personal character of the scout as reflected in his attitudes toward God and the ideals of scouting, as reflected in his cooperation and service to others in church, the home, school, and community. The applicant must have a high degree of the spirit of cheerful service to others, which is the basis of good citizenship. The attainment of the Eagle Scout rank is indeed the highest honor that a scout may achieve. When a boy enters scouting in the three parts of the scout oath, he promises upon his honor to do his best to do his duty, first to God and his country, second to other people by helping them at all times, and third to himself by keeping himself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. Likewise, in the scout law, he promises to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Each is an important foundation in the building of strong character. An Eagle Scout is one who has taken the Scout oath and law to which he has promised and embodied them within his character. The oath and law have become part of him, they guide and direct him. Very few Scouts make it this far, only about 2% of all Scouts, and it is a great achievement for all parties involved: the Scout, his family, his community, his unit, and the Boy Scouts of America. Awarding the Eagle is an important and serious matter. It is the climax and goal toward which these Scouts have been working for many years. It is the culmination of the efforts of the parents and leaders of these Scouts. It is an occasion for pride and for great joy. So Michael, why don't you come up and Scoutmaster Jerebeck, we have a little award we'd like to give you, Michael, for all your hard work. Pledge of a certificate of recognition. The mayor and the city council of the United City of Yorkville present this certificate to Michael Kraus in recognition of his achievement to the rank of Eagle Scout through the Boy Scouts of America Youth Program of Character Development and Values-Based Leadership. Presented this 25th day of February, 2014. Also, Mike, we have a nice plaque that will adorn your future office in Congress or wherever you may end up, because I know we can use a few good men in Congress. There you go, sir. And Mike, I just had one question for you. I know, to achieve this rank, you had to complete what they call an Eagle Scout project. Yours was pretty significant. You had to lead over 40 volunteers at the Outdoor Education Center. Can you tell us a little bit about your Eagle project?
My Eagle project was out at Hoover Outdoor Educational Center, and it was an extension off of a shelter, and I built off of the existing fire pit there. I built a nicer stone fire pit and filled in approximately 12 by 12 gravel area and lined it with timber and built the much needed drainage at the end of the hill there.
Nice. I know it's something people in Yorkville will enjoy for years to come. So, do you want to call your folks up here for a picture? Mr. and Mrs. Grandparents or any other family members for a quick picture?
My mom's here from Greece, so it's kind of special. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
I just want to congratulate Mike also as Scoutmaster Troop 40 and just say I really want to thank the council here for allowing us to come here and to recognize him as an Eagle Scout. Not just that he attained the rank of Eagle, but what that Eagle represents, as Mr. Gawinski stated. It states a lot of virtues, a lot of qualities that a lot of boys really, it's great to see them go through the program and attain all those qualities. And Mike did a great job, and as every Eagle Scout does, so congratulations.
Okay, and I know we have a number of scouts in the audience that are going to stay there working on their citizenship and the community merit badge. They have to take an issue and listen to the debate on the issue and take a position and discuss that position with me at a later date. So we need some good debate tonight. Okay, moving on. We do have a public hearing for 1700 Cannonball Trail, proposed special service area 2014-1. Do we have anyone from the public who would like to speak on this public hearing? Anyone from the council who has anything on this? Hearing none, we will close public hearing for 1700 Cannonball Trail. Do we have any citizen comments tonight on items that are on the agenda? Anything before the council tonight that any citizens would like to discuss? Hearing none, we will move forward to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. I'll move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Colosimo.
Aye.
Mashewski.
Aye.
Raiders.
Aye.
Montalvo.
Aye.
Coe.
Aye.
Teeling.
Aye.
Pat.
Aye.
All right, two sets of minutes for approval. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular city council meetings for January 28, 2014, and February 11, 2014, as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any comments, questions, corrections on minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving as presented, please state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. No mayor's report. have an item under park board, and that is a resolution of authorization for a park grant. So I entertain a motion to approve a Park 3 resolution of authorization for a park grant application for renovation and expansion of the Beecher Center, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute.
So moved.
Second.
Frank, you want to give us a quick rundown and then
Sure.
on the application?
The park grant program is the park and recreation facility equivalent to the OSNET grant program, which we've been successful with in the city. So the proposal we have in front of you was discussed at Park Board a couple weeks ago. It is for a renovation and expansion of the Beecher Center. The drawing and the budget is currently, the budget is currently shown in the drawing, are included within your packet for about $833,000, which is our required match on the $3.3 million grant project. We can get an additional 11,000 square foot facility attached onto the Beecher Center, in addition to renovation of the existing facility, including HVAC replacements, kitchen renovations, and some other general improvements to the Beecher Center. So Park Board did review other locations. Those pros and cons are in your packet, and I can go over them if you want to. But the location that they ultimately selected was the Beecher Center. So I think the only policy question I have for you, other than whether we want to approve it or not, is related to the budget. As currently shown, we're looking at a project between $3.6 and $4 million. And so that's with a basketball court, an indoor track, which was very highly ranked by the 2008 Parks and Recreation survey that was done, and by the Park Board, and then one additional studio being in the facility. So we're adding another multi-purpose room, essentially. So the question is whether we want to continue forward with the track at a cost of $200,000, or studio for a few $100,000, or to just do both of them because we think that it's worth it, and even though we're paying out of pocket for one, we really want a facility that's functional. So I think that's the main policy decision with the application, other than, again, whether you want to approve it or not. Just to recap, this is not budgeted. We do have $25,000 in the budget proposal for fiscal year 15 for Beecher Center kitchen renovations only. Obviously, we put those on hold if we end up applying for this in the hopes that we get the grant. And so if we get the grant application approved by the state, we are given the choice whether to accept or deny. At that point, if we deny, we cannot apply for an OSLAD or for a park grant for 2 years, which, depending on our plans, may or may not be a penalty. But then there's also the unofficial penalty we always talk about with the grant review committee. And so the resolution is in your packet, and the decision is to be made tonight on whether we want to go on the budget. It would be about an $833,000 commitment if we did approve it. That would have to be put into the budget entirely. So that's something, I know we're going to finish the budget proposal for tonight, but would be essentially new money that would further deteriorate either the general fund or the Parks and Recreation fund, depending on where we approved it. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Dave?
We have to do the HVAC, how much is that going to cost, $150,000?
We had estimated it between, as is, $350,000 and $450,000, and that's based on 2 actual quotes we got. The issue with that quote is it puts an HVAC unit back under the roof where it currently is, which is where the majority of the expense comes in, because you have to rip off the roof in order to replace it. So we'd given a higher end figure, $500,000 to $600,000, to put it on the ground, buy a bigger unit that's necessary, and do some additional upgrades to the facility by running new ductwork, and then that way, in hopefully another 30 years, when we replace the HVAC unit, it'd be cheaper the next day. Because it's on the ground, you can just pick it up and move it.
Also, the kitchen is way out of code, so there's issues there that have to be addressed too, either now or one way or the other. So
Yes.
the only other thing I would have to mention is, it wasn't listed into the pros, but if I know staff, where they run a rec center, that they'll be able to generate revenue. I bet you they generate a lot more is currently paying is that's without the mine.
Yeah, we are receiving about $6,000 annually from senior services for leasing the facility. It's $500 a month. And I know that the open gym revenues we ran the rec center were more than that. I don't know what they were off the top of my head. But
It disparity part, about $10,000 last year.
Yes, sir.
You know, I'm all for this, but my biggest concern is where's the money going to come from? We sat in Public Works last week worrying about, residents having raw sewage in their basement, worrying about in Ward 1, every time it rains, whether their basements are going to flood. Streets in the area. And there's only so much money. And I think there's no funding mechanism other than the general fund for this, correct? There's no other grants out there that would pick up our share.
correct.
I would support this partially for the Beecher Center improvement only. Because eventually we're going to have to do that no matter what. So is that something we can put forward as a grant?
Yes, I'm sure that we could include that component to it. I don't know how highly it'll rank because you're supposed to be addressing needs of the community as it relates to recreation programming. And so if we just fix the HVAC unit, do some general upgrades and replace the kitchen, they might say, well, you can continue to use the facility for senior services, but you're not really addressing the needs of the community. You're just fixing maintenance issues. So I'm fairly certain that the grant will be scored over.
Is there a penalty for not applying, for waiting a year?
No, other than there's no guarantee that they'll offer it again. I think they skipped a year, so it hadn't been offered in 2 years. If I remember.
2011.
What was it again?
2011.
So it does skip a year. So there is a way to feasibly, hypothetically, think, okay, we're going to need $1 million. And then we can apply for a grant. If we get a grant, $1 million will make sense. We can get everything we want. If we don't, we just go for it, we get it. It's kind of like the Bristol Bay Park. I was like, oh, that would be awesome. But then I'm thinking, we don't have a grant to cover the rest of that stuff. As much as I want, we don't have. So it's more of like a, how do we put this into next year, the following year's budget, to have money on the if factor? Because right now I want it, no doubt, I want it. Well, we don't have the money. Just as simple as that. So it's more of a, is there a way in future budget planning to plan for, okay, we need $1 million, then if we do get the grant, we can then run with this the way it is right now. Yes, I mean, you can address that need each year. The only, it's not a risk, potential lost opportunity is if the HVAC system breaks, then we have those match costs anyway, and we're not getting anything on top of it. So either way, we're not stuck.
And that's the whole reason that this grant application really came forward, is because we're on borrowed time. I mean, if that HVAC goes, we're going to spend $450,000 putting another unit back in the roof where it is and getting nothing for that $450,000. Well, we'll get heat and air. But for an extra $400,000, you're getting a whole new recreational facility. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I think that's where the rub comes in, where we have to decide what we do. We are going to pay $400,000, $500,000 coming up no matter what. I mean, that unit was installed in 1980. It had a 15-year life?
Yeah.
It's been more than 15 years since 1980, last time I checked. So eventually, in the next few years, we're paying $500,000 no matter what we do. So then the dilemma becomes, for an extra $300,000, we get a 1,000 square foot facility, which obviously makes sense, paying per square footage. The concern I have, and I discussed this well in the front office, he brought it up, was if it's a $3.3 million grant, we pay $800,000 of that. The budget that you have in there for that facility is $4 million, which in my estimation, we pay the difference between $3.3 million and $400,000, correct? So it's $800,000 plus $700,000 for $1.6 million, $1.5 million, correct?
Correct.
I would be for it if whatever we engineer or draw out is $3.3 million. Because I would vote to spend the $300,000 extra from the HVAC to the $800,000 grant to get a 1,000 square foot facility. 11, what is it?
11,000.
11,000, sorry, 11,000 square foot facility. But I'm not in favor in any way, shape, or form of spending $1.5 million. We don't have. So if the total budget for this building is 3.3, I'm in. If the total budget is 3.8 or 4 million, I'm out.
So with one studio, you're looking at between 3.5 and 4 million, which is the one studio
And the track, yeah.
and the track.
With both included, so, I phrase it as an either or proposition. You can, I think the studio, it's listed on the line item there. The studio itself is $160,000, but there's some additional cost that would be removed. And then I think the track itself is slightly more expensive.
Chris?
Did we set the $3.3 million? That was our target budget for the project?
That's the maximum you're allowed under the grant program.
That's the
It's
grant,
$2.5
that's the
million state contribution.
Okay. Because if we're looking at 600, based on the FGM's conceptual budget, $660,000 for the renovations, the HVAC kitchen and general renovation. $2.6 million is what we would be looking at if we're trying to just match the grant money for that purpose of doing that. If we're going to be on the high side of $4 million, that's too much to be doing that. The intent was to find a way to help us get something out of the money we know we have to expend. You said there's $25,000 in the budget this year, 15 for kitchen renovations. Is that going to cover all of our kitchen renovations?
That would bring it up to code, yes.
Okay. Is it, like, as I'm seeing it in their budget, $50,000 to $60,000 to do that. That's twice as much as what we're budgeting. How realistic are the numbers? $4 million versus $2.6 million is a big difference because we eat anything over what we're going to contribute to it. And if the maximum that we can get is 3.3 million, if we're contributing 800,000, do we need to contribute that much? Can we scale it back, keep it within something that's more manageable? We know we're going to have $600,000 completely.
I think I would say that you definitely do not want to apply for something that's beyond 3.3. We would show that, and then if for some reason we get the grant, we go out to bid, it's more, then we would have to make some decisions on where we can save money at that time without removing features that may make our grant eligible. So, and that would be the main features of the facility. If it ends up being a basketball court and indoor track only, you'd have to build it for that. Maybe you put a different facade on it, or you figure out a way to do the outdoor improvements cheaper. There are a number of cost-saving mechanisms we look to employ in that.
Yeah, I'd like to have more facilities and more amenities for us, but we went through this whole process with the rec center, and it was not feasible for us. So this is kind of coming back around to that. Can we expend the same amount of money to do what we decided a year ago we couldn't do? So unless we can reduce the scope of the grant application, I don't see this being very successful for us.
Jackie?
Well, I just have a problem. I understand we need the updates to the air conditioning and all that. And if the grant was for just that, I really support it. Like Larry, Pat said, we talked about it. We're talking to get our roads fixed, which I think is a more crucial thing than having a walking track. I think people need safe roads to drive on. We're talking about increasing our water rates. How do we justify that to the people that live here? Gee, we're gonna charge more for your water to get the roads fixed. We're gonna take this money and we're gonna put it in the rec center. I think it's just bad timing right now. I don't know if I can support the whole thing. I know we need the air conditioning fixed. I know we need the kitchen updated. We need the essentials right now. It's just like when you're home. You know what your budget is. You just take care of the essentials. So I have problems when we're talking about raising people's bill for water. They go into that.
I agree. We have been sitting in Public Works talking about the roads, and we have, I don't know, how much, $5 million in different road projects. And I think we had a good facility that we were using that wasn't costing the city a lot of money, even though it was painted a different way. And I I understand that we have to get this HVAC fixed. I understand that we're going to have to do that. And I think that, you know, if we have to be committed to doing that because we need that building as it is, I think this is bad timing. I don't think that I would support this at all at this point. Because we had something that was voted to go away, that we were using, that was actually bringing money into the city. And I understand that this could potentially bring money into the city too, but we have too many projects that we have to do that are just staring us in the face, and we don't even know where we're going to get that money to do it. So where is this money going to come from? No, I'm not going to do this, I'm sorry.
Or can they, the money that they have to come up with, can they get finance that to their budget? Parks and Rec, over a period of time?
Well, it's more of a policy decision for you to direct to them. I mean, they've got their own requests and own project budgets into the city council, that pulls from the city council budgets. So you can code the expense wherever you want too.
General fund goes from the general fund, I mean,
Right.
same money.
But the proposal before us right now is still the 3.8, 4.0 proposal. That's what we have in front of us.
That's a facility that has everything in there that was identified as not necessary, but a wish list by the park board in the previous survey. That would be our best possible facility to go into the grant application process to say, you know, this is going to get us the highest score. So I did find the budget here, $225,000 for Studio 1. So if you subtract that out, that gets you within your 3.3. And then the walking and running track is actually much more expensive, $411,000. So that brings it down even further. I understand what everybody's saying about $500,000 or $600,000 is, you know, considering that to be kind of a sunk cost to the city, even if we haven't budgeted for the existing renovations. You know, if you triple that and you get $1.8 million for $2.5 million or so, you know, you're not going to get, or $2.2 million, you're not going to get a particularly large facility. You might get 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. It might be a basketball gym only. So again, you get to the point where as you scale it back, you make your grant application less worthy. So it's definitely balancing that.
I just want to say one thing, that I do appreciate the staff and the park board finding this grant. I think it's a really great opportunity. I just don't think that it's a good time. And I know that you work hard on this, and it's something that the city does need. And, you know, I'm sorry that I can't support it right now, but I just can't not looking at all the other things. And I know that you do work hard, and I know that this is important. I just don't see it happening right now.
I think the one thing I'm looking at from a young person's perspective is that it's only one basketball court. If I was going to count a couple $1 million into something, it would have to be 2 basketball courts, a pool.
It'd be a large basketball court, so it'd be one full, and then you'd be able to do two smaller size, yeah. But full basketball courts with multiple hoops on each side, it's just they'd be short of the regulation.
Okay. I'm just saying, if you're going to go big, go big. I know that you kind of hit a certain threshold to kind of earn the grant. At the same time, it's only going to be the right size for about 3 to 4 years, because then you're going to get the next influx of a boom, and we're going to go from 17 to 27. So it's, yeah, again, it's bad timing, much needed, very bad timing.
Just clarification, what's the status of the school's plan for a field house, you know?
I believe that's in their phase, I don't know if Chris knows.
It is in a later phase. They authorized, last time they actually authorized some alternates to be done based on the monies that they received from the state, but they're not doing the full-out field house yet.
And also, Chris, from our ad hoc committee, and the deal with the schools, when we were going to partner at that time, they wanted like 4 to 6 million or something, right? Was the number that was being thrown out there?
Right, there would have been a need for us to be able to utilize it and benefit from it. We would have had to contribute to it. Right now, we have a shared use agreement for the areas, but there are some problems with that, with availability, maintenance, and some other issues. But it does give us the ability to use it during certain hours, certain days.
Beth, did you want to say anything on this? I know you brought this forward to the park board.
Yeah, we do have a terrible need for programming space since we lost the rec center. And the opportunity to get $2.5 million, funded to us to a park grant. I know the contribution is, an issue, but you are at jeopardy of your habit system going out at any time, and that those funds, you have a kitchen that needs to be updated. I understand the windows of the building too have issues. I really, really think that it could be worked out where we take out the track or work within the limits of the budget before everybody just says, no, we don't want to do it.
And I don't know.
I think you need to debate that more. We have the architect here. You could speak to him and see how, there is padding in there. I mean, it is going to generate revenue also. I mean, we did a good job. Tim is fantastic at generating revenue. I mean, he proved that with the rec center, with the turnaround we had there.
That is one of the reasons for the need. I know the rec center, we had walk-ins to play basketball for $5 a head. And since that went away, I know there's a real lack of place.
The city lost revenue too. I know the issue people have with it. In fact, my first thought was to maybe go after the rec center again. I just give them the 2.5 if we could get the grant. That's a huge building on a great piece of property. But, we've had issues with the time limit, could we do it? The location of the Beecher Center is great, and we don't know if this grant will come around. I mean, they don't do this all the time. So I would really think about it and try to figure out if we can do this without just making a staff decision tonight.
One other item we forgot to, we didn't figure out until after the package went out. There's $95,000 for a relocated water main too. Our most recent GIS locating says there's actually no water main on the west side of the building. So whichever direction we end up expanding, if you approve the grant application, would be determined at a later date based on a lot of things. But that is something potentially that would be up in the air as far as cost goes. That would be removed from the budget and let last. There's no water main there.
That's the only side there's not water main. They ran the water main on the north side of the building out the gate farm to tie into Commerce.
Yes, sir.
Well, so I guess that's the question I have. Let's assume we're going to put in $500,000 to $600,000 for this HVAC. Because that's going to happen whether we do something or don't do anything. So if that's 25%, we're looking at $2 to $2.4 million. So everything between our $500,000 to $600,000 and the $2.0 to $2.4 million is covered by a grant. That's not more money out of our pocket. Can we get this, as you asked, can we get this project under 2.4, 2.3, 2.2? Because if we get there, we're getting a facility for what we're going to be paying for the HVAC.
Right.
We're getting the facility for just the cost of the HVAC. It'd be ridiculous to pass that up or at least try. But anything above that, I agree with what everybody said. We have sewers, we have streets, we have other things that need to be done.
As a taxpayer, I agree with that too.
Right.
But I'm trying to figure out how we can get this done. Whether you take
Well,
out,
that's my question.
you
Can
take
we
out
get
the
it done
track,
for
I think we
2.3?
can do it. It's just a matter of,
And if we put it
looking
out
at
there and they say it's not good enough and we don't get the grant, we're not out of
you're
penny.
not out anything.
Just doing the math, you've got $3.6 million currently in there. Okay, so let's say we take out the track and we take out the studio. That's 600, so that brings us down to $3 million in total. Maybe we take out the relocated water main, that gets us down to 2.9. I mean, the remaining actual items in the facility that are not existing feature center related are a lobby for $75,000, the gymnasium for $873, which maybe you can scale back slightly, and toilets and regular mechanical area. So, you'd almost have to create like a half gym or go in a different direction and take the gym out entirely and only do studio spaces.
Yes, sir.
If you remember the first budget I prepared, actually did not have a right grant. Some of you may have seen it. Last week, I was told there's a water main loop all the way around the building that can be relocated. So there's a lot of information that isn't quite there yet, but part of that is because of the speed that this grant has to be submitted. It has to be in their hands on March 10th. It's not that far away. But the initial budget, I must have heard it wrong, because at the park board meeting, I had the priorities, the gym, the program spaces, then the toilet rooms, and then the track last. And then when I talked with Art, and then he talked with the recreation staff, we need the track moved up. But the budgets then went from, without the track, went from about 3.259 to 3.68, in that range right now, which gets it a lot closer to the $3.3 million, which is the 2.5 of the match. And that had 2 program rooms in it, the gym, toilet rooms, and a lobby, and some mechanical space. So we're not talking crazy there. It comes down, can you get it down here? I think we probably can. Timing, you don't even know the results of this grant probably for 10 months to a year. So we need to understand that too. When the park grants were initially presented, they were allocating $150 million over time. I believe this is the 4th round, and it will be $100 million, and there's another 50 to go. But how long will it be for the next cycle? It could be 2, 3, 4 years. Don't know. The way that the state funding is, maybe it won't. We just don't know. So what comes before you is the option of saying, scale this back to 3.3, hope for the next grant cycle and be ready for that. We don't know what it'll be. Or, don't do it. So those are difficult choices because everything we need right now has a lot of needs. And this is an opportunity that some have taken advantage of. There is no guarantee that we'll get it. Last round was at $50 million worth of grants. Most of those around, let's say, an average of about $2 million. So you give an idea, it's approximately 25 grantees, 25, 30 grantees. And there were 200 people, over 200 that applied. So also you give you a realism of what's the chances. As a community, I see that we actually have a very compelling story. We've had a rec center. There's needs in this town. We lost the rec center. That's pretty compelling to a grant person. We had something that we lost. That's another thing that, when you talk about timing, it's like, wow, you have all these issues going on. It's kind of really interesting. So I don't envy the position you're in to make this decision, but I just wanted to at least bring some more background for the history of the grants and hope that helps.
Okay, yes, sir.
Bart, say we apply for the grant. It takes 10 months to hear back, but in 2 months, the HVAC fails, we pay that out of pocket. What happens?
Well, I guess we'd have to inquire with the grant committee as to whether we would be allowed to shift the renovation costs around the building. So they might say that that's possible, they might say that that's not possible.
Yes, ma'am.
May I ask, when did the park board start discussing this? When did you find out about this grant?
They only discussed it last week. We found out about it about 2 weeks ago. So
It just always seems these things come down, we don't have time to send it back, have a downsize, have the numbers,
Yep.
and that's another discussion.
The state does that on purpose so that you can't have a lot of time to prepare for these things. So I think that they had actually distributed it at the end of January, and we found out a week later.
And also, Brad, I believe a certain chunk of this grant money is already going to Chicago.
Yeah, it's allocated.
It was announced on the 24th of January. The official release was the following week. It wasn't a lot of time.
And if you do get it, you can always say no. Right? And I'm not really in favor of applying for a grant with the idea of saying no, but there is an option. All right, any more discussion on this? Roll call.
Nay.
Maschewski,
Nay.
Teeling,
Nay.
Vote.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, good conversation. Like I said, it's bad timing, Doug. You know, keep at it though, we appreciate you bringing it forward. Okay, next is a first reading, so there is no action required on the planning commission item for medical marijuana. So, this first reading for an ordinance amending the Yorkville zoning ordinance by adding medical cannabis cultivation center and dispensing organization as special uses in M1 zoning district. First reading. So do we have any, does anyone want to make any comments at this point on it? We're going to see it again in 2 weeks. Any comments now? Yes.
I think the one comment that I would make is that I understand the cultivation center kind of requires a large amount of space and that logistically have to be kind of reserved for M1. But as far as the dispensaries goes, I know that the first step towards recreational use is the medical marijuana. But I'm looking at Colorado with a 21.12% sales tax. And I really want a 21.12% sales tax on marijuana sales. So I'm wondering, and I had already asked you this, what your opinion was, how do you get that to be like a B1, B2? So I'm thinking Kendall Pub, I don't know if it's ever come back, if it was a Kendall Pub, I'm just saying, you could make a lot of money, fix a lot of roads, build a brand new park facility, purely on... What's everything smiling at? As much as I might sound facetious, I'm serious. If this is a part of the process, to allow the dispensary to be B1, B2, to allow, a storefront, bring them in. I'm ready to sit back down.
And if in the future, if our this ever did go forward, what would be, Christie, what would be the process to change this out for dispensaries going to B1, B2? You just have another public hearing, another planning commission?
We would have been, we had to do text amendment again for businesses. We did actually consider that at the staff level, but because of the state regulations that they have to be 1,000 feet from public school,
Right.
it just wouldn't work in, or residential areas, it just wouldn't work in any of our existing districts.
Wow. I think we should dig deep, figure out a way to make that happen, whether it's amending the, you can have a residence above a dispensary, whatever it is.
Well, we can, the state is dictating this, we're adopting it. The only thing that we changed in the state's regulations is that we added parks and religious facilities as another class that we had to maintain their setback barrier. So until the state muddles through this, they're still working through some of the aspects of it. And we can probably have more clarity. And right now, as it stands, our M1 district currently zoned properties in M1 wouldn't even fit into the criteria.
Right. Just don't want to close that door.
No, it'll be one at a later date.
Right.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm with Joel, and I don't think we should be putting a burden on a business that should be in a business area versus a manufacturing district. It should be in a business district, even if it physically can't happen, we should not restrict it based for the reason that it couldn't happen. It should be in a business, it is a business. By our regulations, that's where it should be. I know that there are other criteria that restrict it and put burdens on it, but we shouldn't be putting that encumbrance on it. We should allow it in B1 or B2, whichever one, assuming it could physically work, which currently it doesn't. So I'm with you for supporting that there. And the other is, I'm not so sure I necessarily agree with restricting it from the religious institutions and the schools. The state did set criteria as to where they would be restricted. I understand a little bit of the logic behind it, but I'm not sure that that's where I can agree in terms of restricting it even further.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we will see this again in 2 weeks for a vote. Okay, no CBA report, no city council report, city clerk's report, and community and liaison reports. Nothing? Any staff reports, no staff reports? No reports. And then we have a second presentation tonight, the second half of our fiscal year 2015 budget presentation. Vice Is this the only other presentation, Bart? We're going to start discussing budget next meeting?
Correct. Okay, and as the mayor stated, this is the final presentation for me on the budget, so that's good news, right? We've got one mandated public hearing at the next meeting, and then again, we just have to make sure that we approve fiscal year 15 expenses by April 30th. So tonight, we're going to go over the small picture, so this will be all the individual line items and projects and a little bit of detail on each one. And again, as a reminder, we do show a 5-year budget, but we're only approving next year's budget, and then everything else beyond that is a planning tool. So before we get into the individual line items, I just want to give you a snapshot of the general fund balance last year compared to this year's budget. So it's a little hard to tell on the slide with the lights, but the top line is red, which is this year's budget, and the blue line, which is the bottom, is last year's. So we're starting off from a significantly better position this year than we were in last year's budget, but with our current projections, we end up in the same place in fiscal year 18. So, between now and then, we got to make sure that we don't get there. Right off the bat, under revenues, first, and one of the biggest revenue sources we have is property taxes. Again, we are proposing to grow the operational property taxes by the cap, which is CPI. But again, when you combine the city and the library taxes, those are going to decrease for the next few years for our policy. Property taxes for the police pension, we're meeting our actuarial recommendations in fiscal year 14 to 15, and Rob was nice enough to do a little analysis before the meeting. The recently audited numbers for fiscal year 13, I believe, we actually ended up paying down part of our past obligation from 2 years ago by about $13,000. So we actually collected more property taxes and paid more to the police pension fund than our actuary recommended, at least for that individual year. But again, we have that unfunded liability of $650,000 from previous years where we were shortchanging the fund. So we paid that down, which is good. Municipal sales tax and non-home rule sales tax are conservative projections throughout. That meets our overall revenue projection goal to keep things at 1 to 2% unless we have a real good reason to go higher. Amusement tax and admissions tax, no real net change from last year. Any increase that you see is going to be offset by a rebate in the expenses. State income tax, we also didn't budget for an increase at all, even though the state's economy is improving, and so we're getting more money than previous years. Just because of the uncertainty of the different state initiatives to either hold back the local share or to implement a lower income tax or higher income tax, we're not really sure where it's going to go. So we said, just assume a steady revenue stream. Video gaming tax, we've got a new facility in Java Jills. Building permits, again, our understanding is that we're going to be keeping only enough revenue in the general fund to offset the building department salaries and operations. Then everything else we're going to use as a one-time expense by putting it in the citywide capital. Engineering expenses, there is a reimbursement line item in the revenue section of the general fund, and that is anything that we receive as reimbursement from developers or from a state project, and that's going to offset all of your engineering expenses in the admin services fund. Okay, so now an overview of all the funds, kind of the different line items that are the same. Salaries, again, we do have a 3% increase in fiscal year 15, which is a change from last year's budget. We didn't have anything budgeted in 15 or in 16 through 19. And we do have some undetermined increases in fiscal year 16 and 19. Again, that's all going to depend on how much vacation people cash out, whether people are leave and we rehire somebody at a different rate. So it's tough to estimate those beyond fiscal year 15. Health insurance, 8% increases each year through fiscal year 19. That's actually a relatively average rate for our past few years. We had a couple wild swings where we had 30 to 40% increases before the Affordable Care Act went into effect. And a couple of years we managed to have decreases. So We're going to try to keep that down, and each year we review that, but 8% across the board. IMRF, depending on their pension returns on investments, that can be higher or lower, but we are projecting that to be higher each year through fiscal year 19. Same training and travel across all departments as last year. We want our department heads and our supervisors to go to state and national conferences when they can, when the supervisor thinks it's a good idea, to keep up to date on all the best management practices and tips and trends of municipal government. And then commodities, gasoline, electricity, natural gas. We did assume either inflationary increases, especially in contractual services, or for gasoline and electricity, we have some of the preliminary numbers on those things, so we took those into account in the budget. Okay. And then the final one across all departments is professional services. This is always the one that gets the most questions each year, what are professional services? So I've listed 3 departments right there. In the narrative, if you look at the budget memo, there's a detailed list of each kind of category in each department of what a professional services is. If anybody's really interested, you can email me or talk to me or Rob after the meeting. We can print you out a detailed report that's got every professional service expense that we've paid out in the past 4 to 5 years. All right, into the departments. Administration and finance, even though we have not made the move to reappoint the city treasurer, we did put it in there in case we decided to do that. Salaries, part-time salaries, when you take those 2 line items together in the admin department, we did say that we were going to discontinue the NIU internship program because of some changes in how they pay out for interns, actually, and hire a management analyst instead. For 4th of July, we didn't necessarily propose a funding level because we knew that was a policy decision for the city council, but we did list in there that it would be probably between $10,000 and $20,000 each year if we were to participate financially. And then just a note on auditing services, which is in the finance department. We're in our 2nd of 5 years of the auditing contract. So in the police department, again, 2 hires this year, 2 hires next year, and that's going to cause a spike in your police commission and some of your testing. And then additionally, legal services, we are assuming that our union negotiations are going to take the assistance of outside counsel, even though we've been fortunate enough to be able to negotiate without for the past couple contracts. Then you're going to see vehicle equipment chargeback across all the different departments. That's the gap within each operational department as to what the vehicle and equipment fund is not funding when we buy 3 police cars. So if you see this vehicle and equipment chargeback to police, which you do, that's the shortfall that their department is eating because there's not enough impact fees there. Community development, we hired a new planner 1 this year, and then additionally for city council goals, we've got comprehensive plan update and a Southside commercial market study. And I talked to Alderman Koch yesterday at the meet, or on the phone rather, and we are going to bring forward the RFP for both of those services at a future EDC meeting and let everybody review them so that way we can get moving on both of those studies as soon as possible. Economic development is our annual contribution to the YEDC. And then on to public works. So this is page 81 if you're following along with the PDF. Again, you've got vehicle and equipment chargeback, so there's a gap in public works between what the impact fees generate and what we're purchasing vehicles for. We've got the sidewalk program, which we moved out of this department, put it in capital fund because it's capital expense. Note on mosquito control, that's no change from last year to this year. We're only treating storm sewer inlets. And trim stump removal, we did increase the cost on that from last year to this year to combat some of the emerald ash borer tree removals, not necessarily tree replacements. And then hanging baskets, it's nice because Route 47 should be done this year in the downtown, so we'll be able to re-implement our hanging basket program. Garbage services, this was a lengthy discussion last year. We talked about it in admin for a few months. This, what's represented on the screen, is the most recently adopted and recommended program to phase out the senior subsidy by the city council. So it represents a 2-tiered system for seniors, one that everybody gets if you're a senior, and the second if you are eligible for circuit breaker. And in general, over 2 years, it rolls out the discount from its current 50 cents per month is the cost that seniors pay while we pay $17.61 to provide that service per month. And so the 2 different percentage reductions are on the screen there with the dollar amount. We are proposing as part of this to directly start this on May 1st. So the first bill doesn't go out until the end of June, so you would have another month or two after the budget is approved to actually debate it if you wanted to change it. But again, for planning purposes, we do recommend that you make an implicit endorsement of this program, if that's what you see fit, and then that way we're not getting ourselves into revenue issues after the fact of the budget being approved. Admin services, page 84, this is kind of our catch-all department in the general fund. Again, this is where the amusement tax rebate is for the movie theater. So again, there's no net impact to the budget because whatever we take in, we're rebating until we comply with the incentive agreement for the theater. KenCom in fiscal year 15 will be very interesting. We think we overestimated the amount of expense for our first full year payment for our intergovernmental agreement. And from KenCom's director and chairman, they did think that we had overestimated it too. So I think we put $150,000 in there for fiscal year 15. So I'm hoping it'll be much less than that, but a lot can happen between now and January when we get our next invoice. So didn't want to count any chickens there before they hatch. On IT services, we talked about this as part of the big picture. New website, online streaming of meetings, which would include a nice camera in here that people could watch from home, and a phone system, which if you've been following along, we've had some trouble with our existing phone system at City Hall as of late. So it's original to the building in 1999. Also in admin services, you've got the gross cost of all your engineering services. Again, big picture note, it's still cheaper to do outsourced engineering than it is to bring it in-house. The business district rebate for Kendall Marketplace is in here. The admissions tax rebate for Angel Waves is in there. Again, no impact on the budget. It goes in, or it comes in, and we send it back out to the developer. And then the contingencies line item was zeroed out as a result of our amendment of fund balance policy this year. And then finally, the transfers within the general fund are all listed right there. I think we've addressed most of those already. Same for sewer, that's the non-local sales tax. Skip over those. All right, on to our non-general funds. So first, we're going to take two SSA funds, Fox Hill and Sunflower. For both of these, we do have in the budget the two capital projects that we had discussed last year as part of the budget. Trail maintenance at Fox Hill, pond maintenance, including naturalization, not dredging, in the fiscal year 15 budget in Sunflower. And we do have the same increased SSA taxes that were approved as part of the levy that we did in December. MFT fund, a couple main projects in here. Baseline road bridge repairs. The deck on the bridge is actually deteriorating and will be an issue, both for traversability, but potentially, if you don't fix it, could cause a structural issue down the road. And so we do have that scheduled to occur in fiscal year 15. I think it's $50,000. So hopefully that'll come in under budget. Route 47 expansion, anything that's MFT related, again, we've got here just a note on this. By the end of fiscal year 15, we'll have made 31 out of 120 payments, so we're a fifth of the way there, which is exciting. Cannonball LAFO project, this is the mill and overlay that we had accelerated last year, so that'll start and hopefully finish this summer. And then we're into our citywide capital fund. So these are all revenues on page 95, and these are going to deal with, we've got grant reimbursements. So with the ITEP Streetlight Downtown program, we are expecting to be reimbursed in fiscal year 15 and 16, assuming we complete the project this year. Road infrastructure fee, we're not proposing any changes other than what's currently on the bill for the next 5 fiscal years. And then reimbursement for Pulte, Autumn Creek. This is the money that the developer is sending us as a result of a previous commitment to offset our $1.2 million mill and overlay of Kennedy Road adjacent to Autumn Creek. We've got bond proceeds in there for Game Farm Road. So assuming that this budget is approved, there has been a discussion among staff and our financial advisors. We might actually go out for bond sale sooner rather than later. Even though the Game Farm Road project itself won't start until April 2015, we may push for better interest rates now, do the bond sale, and then put the money away until we need it. So that's something that we will analyze and then come back at a later date with. Transfer from the general fund for its building and grounds, it's listed as B&G. That is all of the capital expenses that used to be housed in the street department. We moved them out of the general fund into a capital fund. And again, on the citywide capital down here, we're not projecting that we need any transfers to complete our existing projects until fiscal year 19. Expense side, we talked about the property and building maintenance services. Again, that's where the $25,000 for the feature center kitchen renovation is, which we will move forward with now, obviously, assuming the budget is approved for the day. And that's where our Kennedy Road costs also are. Road to Better Roads is in there. The downtown streetscape improvement is in there. With the streetscape, hopefully the engineering will be completed this year, and we'll be able to actually move forward on the project in summer of 2015 or spring 2015. How the weather is. But the net cost of that program is included within the downtown TIP. So there's no net impact in the citywide capital fund for that project. Big projects potentially coming down the road with IDOT. We've got Route 71, which we've talked about as part of our water fund discussion. That's in there because there are other costs associated with that project other than the water main relocation. Those were itemized in a letter of understanding we approved a few years ago. Same for Route 34, Route 34, the east side of the city. We approved a memorandum of understanding a few years ago. They're moving forward on land acquisition. It's tentatively in their 5-year budget. It could begin really any year after they're done with land acquisition. And then the Game Farm Road project, which we've already talked about. Kennedy Road bike trails in there. That's a change in budgeting assumptions from last year to this. Last year, we had assumed that they were going to fail in their fundraising goal, so we were going with the most conservative revenue projections. This one, after the conversations we've had with Lynn, and then also just looking at their current bank balance, we're fairly comfortable that in 6 to 7 years, they'll be able to fundraise the balance of their expenses. So then we've got principal and interest payment for Game Farm Road. Again, that's assuming we go out for debt service and bond this year. We've got River Road bridge payments for the county, and then the transfer to the general fund that coincides with our closeout of the municipal building fund. All of the chargebacks are in the vehicle and equipment fund. Those are going to be related to the line items I talked about in each one of the individual operational departments for gap between impact fees and how much the vehicles cost in each department. Parks capital, you're going to see this throughout the budget. We have money in vehicle and equipment right now to do improvements in the Raintree Village, one of their parks, given to us by Lennar a few years ago. And so we have to get that out of vehicle and equipment and transfer it over to park capital. So that's money that we had for a specific purpose. We've got a couple vehicles and equipment there in Public Works capital that we've talked about. Like. Same with police, and then Public Works, again, there's a couple other vehicles there. One note on our 185 Wolf Street, so that's our South Public Works building. The interest rate is variable throughout the 20-year purchasing agreement, but it did actually decrease this upcoming year, so we're going to save about $9,000 per year in payments, which is nice. Still on the expense side of vehicle and equipment fund, we've got some mowers and parks. Bridge Park, which is something that we haven't talked about yet publicly, but we looked at that from a staff level and said the amount of investment that people are putting into that facility with rentals each year for tournaments. They've said that they would like another baseball field there. We think it makes sense that there's a return on investment there actually over a number of years. And then additionally, you've got some inefficiencies with the existing layout with the shelter and there is no shelter, but the parking is that people don't use half of the parking lot because they don't want to get hit with foul balls. So we have to figure out a way to address that because we have a parking lot stuff we need. And then in parks, we've got to do utility. Debt service fund. This is a debt service payment from an in-town road program bond from years ago. Again, we're going to be scaling back those property taxes with our property tax rollback plan, and it'll be officially eliminated in fiscal year 19. And I believe that's the last one out of all the bonds that we're not paying. Water fund, we've talked about. We'll discuss the water sales. The numbers are, the rates are on the board there. Water infrastructure fee, we're not assuming any changes in fiscal year 19. The connection fees at 65 new housing starts. That's been about in line with what we budgeted in the past. And again, we wanted to be somewhat reactionary there and say we don't want to project growth. We want to keep it conservative. Rental income, that's our cell phone leases for the water towers. And then on the expense side there, we've got the Road to Better Roads program, which we've been discussing in committee and city council level for the past few months. Route 47 water main relocation, which we've already discussed, and then Route 47 expansion, again, 31 out of 120 payments after this year stuff. On the sewer side, we talked about the sewer maintenance fees. Again, we're not changing the sewer infrastructure fee on the bill. And then again, if you look at the transfers from the general fund, that's all of your non-homeowner sales tax that's going to pay down the Rockaway financing about 2020. On the expense side, again, we talked about the new Vector truck, we talked about the Road Better Roads program. Land cash fund, I got a couple projects in this fund over the next couple years. This is where the developer funds for Rangery Park C end up surfacing to do some improvements that we had accepted money for from Lennar years ago. We still do show the Mosher holding costs to hold the Blackberry Creek Grand Reserve property. You'll be interested to know that the 30-acre parcel that we used as a match for the most recent Outside grant, which was Riverfront, which we've accepted and are underway with, the evaluation of that property came back about $8,500 an acre. So only a $240,000 valuation, and I know that when we had accepted it, land was $100,000 an acre or so. But still enough to actually meet our match, so that's good news. Riverfront Park, we've got that in there to start this year. We're going to be preparing some engineering contracts and different construction specifications, park planning materials for your review here in the next few months to get that project underway. Two big ones in the budget, Grand Reserve Park A and Park B, both as part of a previous OSLIDE grant. We have to start them by May 2014 and January 2015, which isn't a big deal because we've got the budget here. We can do those projects. With both of them, we get into the situation that the improvements, some of the improvements that we're discussing in the expense side of these projects were developer commitments from the original Grand Reserve developer. So the conversation has been, well, if the existing landowner would do some of these things, it would be less money out of pocket. You know, they've made no intention, say no interest in actually developing the property. They're kind of just sitting on it for right now. It's something we'll approach them with, but I'm not optimistic that they're going to all of a sudden decide to pay for mass grading here in the next 3 months. So we put the expense in the budget. Rangery Park C, this is where the expense side of those developer funds for the park improvements show up. Then we're on to Parks and Recreation. And on the revenue side, we've been doing very well with all of our classes and programming, with meeting and exceeding revenues. But we did project no growth to make sure that we were conservative throughout. So rental income, that does get coded into Parks and Recreation as a revenue. So everything from the Geneva Kayak building to the River City Roasters building, that all goes into Parks and Recreation because they were using those two buildings as programming space before those businesses moved in. Park rentals, you've got all of our baseball and soccer field rentals for tournaments and for leagues. Hometown days, if you notice, fiscal year 14 expenses were a little lower than normal, and that's because we had those two rainouts. So that will pop back up this year. Vehicle and equipment chargeback again, services and Parks and Recreation. And then on to the expense side there with salaries and wages. We are proposing to fill Parks and Recreation director position and split the cost between Parks and Rec. It's something that's been briefly discussed with the park board, but will remain a city council policy decision. Property tax payment, even though we left the facility last year, we still are responsible for 1 year of property tax payments. And then on to the library, we've got on the revenue side, we did make some assumptions, even though the library board has not approved this yet, that the EAD is going to continue to drop and that their property tax revenues are going to decrease. So that's something where they're levying the maximum right now. And so if they continue to do that, it's really a function of whatever the EAD comes in at rather than whatever their policy decision is. So we made some guesses there, and hopefully they turn out to be wrong because the economy will improve the EADs from the highway. Transfer from general fund is actually two different line items. One is to cover liability and employment insurance. Then the other one that was in there from a planning perspective was going to be for the operational subsidy for the library that we approved last year. The Library Finance Committee did discuss this, and their tentative budget does does not include a request from the city for an operational subsidy. So that's not in our budget either, and if they change their mind, then obviously we'll bring that to you. Then the final funds are all the TIF funds. Countryside, just to note, we're hoping our first full property tax payment from NCG Theater will be fiscal year 16. So we're still a little ways off, but that's better than where we were looking at a couple years ago. And then in the downtown, we should see some increase in fiscal year 15 from the projects that have been completed, so that'll be good news. And then on the expense side, legal services, all the negotiations for the different projects, that's where that gets coded out of. And then the TIF incentive payout, which is also an expense, that's going to be the actual payouts to the developers. We have a tough time estimating those because we're just starting to get them in now for cobblestone, and it really depends on, whatever the assessors decide to do with reassessing the property at the time. So we do have downtown streetscape improvements. Again, this is where the net cost of that grant program is housed. It's in the downtown TIF fund, so it's not impacting the general fund. And then we've got whatever Route 47 expansion costs are eligible in the downtown within this fund. So that concludes my discussion of the individual line items. Again, the next meeting we'll do a public hearing. We have tentatively put the budget on for city council discussion at that meeting. It's been past practice not to vote on the budget the same night, so we'll prepare an ordinance and put it in the packet, provide you with the motion, but it's my guess that it won't be approved that night. And again, those are our remaining dates to approve the budget. And then a note on the April 8th meeting, there is a conflict with the Metro West legislative drive down that we anticipate some city council members attending. And so that date is likely to change either to Monday, April 7th or Thursday, April 10th. That'll be determined at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. Any quick budget questions right now? And now we will discuss it at the public hearing next meeting. Okay, do we have any additional business? No additional business, no executive session. Do you have any citizen comments on any topic? Anyone have anything on their mind? What want to talk about? Hearing none, we will adjourn. Meeting adjourned. Scott's